I want to talk about tonight for a few minutes laptops, supporting laptops.
I'm ready to take it apart.
There's nothing really different about a laptop and a PC except we shrunk everything, put it in a much smaller container, and made it almost impossible to get into.
Yeah.
The things that you need to modify, change on a regular basis, add memory, that's usually pretty easy to get to. Put a new hard drive in, that's pretty easy to get to. Change processor, not so much. So the activity, the primary activity will be to take one apart and put it back together. The laptops that you're going to be using have been taken apart by other students, obviously, who decided, in many cases, that they didn't want to go find the book. So you're going to find some things that aren't right, some things that are broken. Some of you, for these machines, have gone to find the books for the machines, and that's good. It makes it a lot easier to get them apart in a lot of cases because there are little tricks occasionally. When you're working on somebody's laptop and you're not going to use the get the bigger hammer theory and you're actually going to put it back together and expect payment, you probably want to go get the book on how to take it apart because they have some really odd things. And I'll pick on Mac because my son had a Mac and the keyboard quit working. Or actually half the keyboard quit working.
Wow.
To get it off, it tells you to go pop off a particular letter, and I've forgotten which one. There's a screw under that letter. You may see that in the other machines also. To get the screen off, you may have to do this, and you have to take this cover off, and then there's a screw under that cover. So the books for laptops can be critical in getting the things apart so that you can actually put them back together and get it back to somebody in a functioning state.
YouTube videos are also very helpful.
YouTube videos are absolutely helpful. And there's lots of them out there for a number of different machines to do a lot of different things, not just work on computers, things if you got jobs around the house, you know, things are there too. So the objectives, learn about special considerations when supporting notebooks that differ from supporting laptop computers. One of the big things is going to be heat dissipation in these things because we've taken basically the same processing ability, which is going to be basically the same heat producing ability, and put in a much smaller space. So you need to look at those things. How to configure, optimize, troubleshoot slots, ports, peripheral devices used with notebooks. One of the things to optimize here probably going to be the power control options. When is it going to dim? When's it going to turn off? What's going to happen? Is it going to go into a hybrid save state? A hybrid save state is if you have the machine asleep and it runs out of battery, it saves the information to the hard drive before it shuts down completely. That way you're not losing things. And the example there is always you're on a business trip and you're going from New York to Los Angeles or whatever, and your laptop is where it shouldn't be in the luggage because you really shouldn't put it there. And it's in sleep, and you're just going to go and open it up, but the battery dies en route. What about the information that you have, particularly if you haven't saved it on a regular basis? How to replace and upgrade the internal components in the laptop and all-in-one components. And this is going to be, I think, limited. I think you could probably do the radio, the wireless radio. That's pretty accessible. The hard drive, that's accessible. Memory, that's accessible. I say the hard drive is accessible. On the newer ones, it's really accessible because usually just one screw, take it off. Some of the old ones were really odd to get things out. You had to take this panel off, take this out, that out, whatever else. That's where the books come in handy. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? How to troubleshoot hardware problems with notebooks. I don't think a whole lot of difference troubleshooting hardware problems with notebooks and troubleshooting hardware problems with anything else. We're going to go back to the same thing. Does it go through post? What are the indications? Does the screen light up? One of the, I think, probably primary things that people do with laptops is drop them. Anybody ever drop one?
Yep.
Break the screen?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it didn't break the screen. A lot of people are shaking their heads yes and break the screen. How hard is it to break the screen? And we'll go back to Todd's YouTube videos. There's lots of them out there on how to do the screen. Screen costs what, $25, $30, $40? Something like that, maybe. Probably takes 30, 40 minutes, maybe, to replace the screen on these things. So you can do that. Say what?
Big enough hammer you can break it.
Big enough hammer you can break it, but our objective is to fix it, not to break it, unless you're trying to drum up business.
Why does it take that long to put a new one back on?
Because you have to take all of the screws out to get it out. You have to get it lined up. Typically the wireless radio antenna is going to be around the screen, so you got to get all that stuff set back in properly. And you don't want to, and you'll see the connectors that go on these things when you take them apart. Because I want you to take the screens off, I want you to strip the whole thing down so that you know how to get one apart when you do it. It may not take that long, but you know, yeah. But if you probably could do it quicker, maybe you couldn't. It depends on the system. How far do you have to go? What do you actually have to do to get it out? And that's where the books come in handy. I keep doing those. The notebook, portable computer varies. Tablet PCs and netbooks. Tablet PC has more features than a notebook, and a netbook is smaller, fewer features. A netbook is typically going to be one of these little 12-inch screens. 12-inch screen and small keyboard. That's the only thing I don't really like about them. The keyboard's much, much smaller. You can plug a USB keyboard into it. It does have a USB connection. It doesn't have an optical media, though, does it?
It has HDMI on it.
Has HDMI, but it doesn't have an optical media, does it?
No.
So there are some things that they have, some things they don't have, and that's why they only cost, what, a couple $100?
160.
160?
Used.
160 used, but they're not that expensive. Depending on the operating system you get on them. If you go with a Windows machine, it's going to cost more than if you go with the Linux machine. Notebooks and desktops use the same technology as we said. Smaller, portable, less power. Take the same functionality and put it in a much, much smaller place. The replacement parts generally going to cost more than desktops. And what you're going to find about replacement parts is the older the part, the more expensive it's going to be. We've looked at some really old motherboards that had some really old memory in it, and if you go look up the price of that really old memory, is going to be, you thinking, oh, it's no good, nobody's using that stuff anymore. That's why it's expensive, because nobody's using that stuff anymore. It's just not available. It's one of those sort of circumstances. A variety of ports and slots. That's what Todd was talking about. USB, I think right now, and at least for the near term, is going to be the port of preference, a number of those things, because just about anything that you want to add to a machine now, you can get a USB type of device. They're going to talk about PCMCIA cards, adapters, and those ports don't exist on the new machines. That would be for a wireless NIC. If you want a wireless NIC now, you're going to go buy a USB wireless NIC. If you want to upgrade from your 802.11 into 802.11 AC, you can buy an AC USB NIC. And disable the one that's on board. A lot of times you just turn it off, turn the power off, turn the radio off so that it doesn't function. But this is side view, and every one of them is going to be different. This one's actually, I was going to say relatively old, kind of relatively old, kind of not though, isn't it? Because we have here, we got the DC jack. Let's see if this thing will work. DC jack, plug in the power, but not John's because his son chewed it up today. And we have these things, USB 2.0s and USB 3.0s. The USB 3.0, again, are going to be blue. The USB 2 are going to be black. VGA port, and I noticed that a number of them that you guys have had don't have VGA ports on them anymore. What they do have, as Todd said, an HDMI port on it. May or may not have. This has got an Ethernet port. That's always a good thing to have. And somewhere in here, and I think that the book says most laptops come with wireless NICs. I think all laptops now probably come with wireless NICs. So I think you probably have a difficult time finding one without it. This one's here's got an HDMI port. We can play our videos, play it onto your TV with the HDMI port, or HDMI or VGA. Yeah, but HDMI is the preferred because if we do HDMI, we don't have to worry about our speaker connection. Because HDMI has both audio and video on it when we do those things. Microphone and a cable lock to protect the system. And over here we have the optical drive, which is going to be on a laptop. Probably not going to see that on a netbook. Netbook lower end. So it's a cheap, and that's me cheap. It's just a cheap laptop, right? Smaller. It is smaller, lighter weight. A couple of things that I noticed, and we got over here, we got the SDI slot and the Magic Gate slot to put in your directly plug in your SD card so that you can take the pictures directly off of the SD card. Those kinds of things. One of the things to me, and for all of you Cisco people, that it is missing is there's no serial port. You have to get, it goes from USB to serial, and then it goes into the converter, goes into the dongle to go into the system itself, to go to the port, to the rollover cable for Cisco. But I keep bringing that up. A lot of the newer Cisco routers actually have a web interface to do the configuration with. You have to read the instructions, and you have to, put the machine on and let it get an IP address from the router itself, and then you can go into the web interface and configure the router. Warranty concerns, and I think we talked about this way back in like day one, warranty concerns. Can you work on this thing or can you not work on this thing? But check if the notebook is under warranty before servicing. You're going to be the one doing the suffering. But a lot of times these things are going to have a little strip of tape says that if you remove this, the warranty is invalid. If you break it, it's invalid unless you are a licensed service tech. And you can do those. We've had a number of students that actually have gotten service contracts or service jobs, at least, from manufacturers. Now, I don't know that they do that so much anymore. They want you to send it back. Take out the hard drive and send it back so we can fix it. You need to take the hard drive out before you send them back because odds are you're not going to get the same computer back. And what makes it unique is the information on the hard drive. We do these things. Contact technical support, the notebook model, the serial number, and the Dells actually have a tag on them that you can go in with the ID tag of a Dell, and it'll tell you everything that was on that machine when it was shipped. Any upgrades are not going to be there, but you can get a lot of information about these things. And the service options on site where somebody comes to your house to fix the computer. Ship to an authorized service center and phone assistance or online chat. How many of you have phone assistance and online chat experience? I'm trying to get my words to have you done it?
With that or
with let's talk about computers right now. How was your experience? Okay. Not great. Not horrible. Not great. But they solved the problem. That probably is the preferred because it doesn't really cost anything. It's preferred for us too because we're not out of a machine for the amount of time it would take for the on-site to get scheduled and get somebody actually there and get the repair parts. Usually what they're going to do, they'll send them a package of what they think is wrong with it, what could be wrong with it based on the symptoms. based on the
That would be
troubleshooting center.
easier reason is to listen to somebody who may or may not speak.
Yeah, but yeah, you're talking about on the, and that's why I wanted to stick here. Yes, a lot of assistances are at places where English may not be the native language. So you have to be very careful about that. Shipped to an authorized service center. I had a friend that had to do that. Had one, and she brought it over. Well, my wife's friend actually said, "I don't know how to take the hard drive out." They said, "Take the hard drive out and send it back, and they'll fix it." Actually, when they take the hard drive out, and they'll send you something else back. It had a heating issue, overheating issue. But shipped to an authorized service center. When you do that, the hard drives do need to come out, because for one thing, that's where all of your information, where any of your personal information might be. I think another thing to consider here is, what if you encrypted the hard drive? Where is the key held for that encryption?
Because you have it.
It's in the BIOS, isn't it?
What the TPM is will be.
TPM, yeah. And that's in the BIOS, right? So we have the TPM, and that's where the encryption key is for the hard drive, and we take our hard drive, our encrypted hard drive out and chip it away, and they send us back a different machine. Now what? You have this really well encrypted hard drive. So think about those kinds of things when you do service on these. If it's encrypted, and that's true for any of them. If the hard drive is encrypted, you need to either export the key, get the key, or decrypt the hard drive before you send it away so that you can continue to use it. Model serial number on the back of the machine, and these are obviously pretty long numbers of the notebook. Identify the notebook to the service desk personnel, and the service number, that's what I was talking about with Dell. They can do those things. Service manuals, save time, and here we go, enables safe notebook disassembly and reassembly, so that you can actually get paid, and you don't have to pay them for working on their computer because you just destroyed it. You really do. I mean, really hadn't been very particular about taking apart the other machines because you can usually figure out a desktop. Laptop, not so much so. Please, when you're doing this for servicing for real, have the book. It'll tell you how to get it apart and how to get it back together. Website, lots of different places. Third-party websites. Sometimes the third-party websites work. Sometimes the third-party websites don't work, so they just want to send you a virus. Be careful when you go to those places. Frequently asked questions pages, basic maintenance tasks for this thing when we do those things. If they have the CD bundle with the notebook, it's probably going to have the service manual on it, and you can get those things. PC Doctor is included with these guys. PC Doctor will come up a lot of times and tell you that they've got the information or they can fix the stuff for you. And if you'll just subscribe to them, they'd be very happy to give you that information. I find that a lot. Most of this information is going to be available eventually if you can get there to get to the right place at the manufacturer's website. Problem is with some of these things is the manufacturers change. Somebody buys something and it's not really necessarily that manufacturer anymore, and they change the website, those sorts of things. So if you're going to do this, you probably want to start collecting manuals as soon as you can. Operating systems pre-installed at the factory. What does OEM mean other than the original equipment manufacturer? I got that. If it's OEM, what does that mean to you? It means that OS is licensed for that set of hardware. You can't legally take that operating system, that version of Windows, and put it on or that particular key for Windows and put it on another machine. That's why anybody ever made enough changes for Windows that in a hardware that it said, Whoop, you made too many changes. You're going to have to go through the authorization process again. Yeah, I've had that happen to me a couple of times. You can get it where you can get it authorized, but you've got, in order to do that, you've got to go through the whole process to get the license revalidated. Proprietary drivers. Proprietary drivers is something you're going to see consistently, proprietary drivers and proprietary motherboards. And you see the proprietary motherboards or the reduced functional motherboards in a lot of machines you buy, HP, a Dell, Compaq, Gateway, any of Lenovo. I'm trying to get them all in, and I can't. But those guys are going to have motherboards made for them that have the functionality that they want. Laptops are particularly notorious for having proprietary drivers. What does that mean? I want to update, upgrade. We used to have a guy here that people would bring in their machines for him, and he would fix them for them, and he used his favorite term was just nuke it. You better get yourself a set of driver set, download the driver set from the machine before you nuke it, because they're not going to be standard drivers. I think I've told you the story. We used to have some machines here that had the built-in NICs on the motherboards. These were desktops that were from a manufacturer, Dell, I think, that we used PXE installs on them, which means that we're installing across the network via the NIC. When Windows got installed, the NICs didn't work anymore. Which was okay, because all we got to do is go to the internet and get the driver, right? Oops, it's the NIC. From a different computer. If we had a different computer. Be careful about proprietary drivers. Get those driver sets. And a lot of times you don't have to necessarily download it from the machine. Go to the manufacturer's website and download the driver sets. You can usually get them in a zip file or whatever else, but you can get those drivers there. As long as you can get to the internet, you're probably going to be okay. But be very careful. Be sure you got the NIC driver. Otherwise, you have those. And that was the be caution when upgrading to a new OS because of the proprietary drivers. They really are an issue. Recovery partition and recovery CDs may be hidden, may be there, and quite honestly may or may not be there with the new machine. Many of them now tell you to create your own recovery partition or your own recovery disk. Be aware when you use these things that the first thing it does is nukes it and restores it to the condition it was in when you walked out of the store with it. So anything that you've installed, any data that you have on the machine went away when we said do it, because that's the first thing it does is blows away the partition. Can that be recovered? Yes, but not so easily. And you can see this is a picture that's in the book that's not really visible from there, that has a recovery partition, which means that we can recover the operating system, basically is what we're talking about, and any of the software that came with the machine. System upgrades, perform only if necessary. You want to do updates, but not necessarily upgrades, because upgrades we get back into this proprietary thing. Remember, the OEM operating system is licensed for use with that hardware set and only that hardware set. Well, OEM. The OEMs are cheaper. If you go, you could probably go to Amazon and look for OEM Windows, and it's going to cost less to license than a commercial version of it does. Tips: upgrade the OS, build from the manufacturer. The device drivers are, to me, a big thing, and follow their specific instructions. Off the shelf, verify the system component compatibility, and this is we'll do the software course the next time, but there is a compatibility list to be sure that your particular hardware is compatible with the newer version of Windows. And there's wizards that'll go through and check compatibility for hardware and software before you actually do the upgrade. Ensure the drivers are available. And this is, to me, this is just me, what do they say here is flash the BIOS before you do the upgrade. What did they say back in Chapter 1? Or 2 or whatever. Only do that if it's absolutely positively necessary, right? And I still go to the flash the BIOS only if it's positively absolutely necessary, because there is a risk, no matter how small, that you're going to turn it into a doorstop. General guidelines, and then these are in the book. Don't touch the LCD panel. Don't let your puppy play with the screen. Those kinds of things. Don't pick it up and hold it by the lid. When you take it apart, the hinges are not really always the greatest things in the world. And this is back to when I was talking about putting it on an airplane. Don't put it in a tightly packed suitcase. I don't think that if you're going to travel on an airplane, I don't think you're going to put it in a suitcase at all. Probably want to do everything you can to do a carry-on. Don't move it while the hard drive is being accessed, which basically means don't move it while it's turned on. How do you know when the hard drive is being accessed?
Power's on.
Power's on. It may or may not be some access is actually looking for data, because when those read-write heads, and we looked at a hard drive in action, when those read-write heads get over the data surface, when we're talking, what, 10 microns, 10 millionths of an inch or something like that, maybe a millionth of an inch, that's pretty darn close.
So
you can actually destroy the data. Huh?
Solid-state drive will be fine with that.
SSD, solid-state drive should not be an issue, because there's no... Remember, solid-state, when we talk solid-state drives, we're talking a whole different world.
I can see where they can start using the solid-state to step it butts and moves. And
well, yeah, and I think that, and we'll pick on AJ here because he's got one, operating system is primarily where it's going to go. Something that accesses the hard drive frequently, which means your page file and the operating system are the things that you want there. Something that the computer keeps going back to time and time and time and time again. When we do data, it goes to get the data, saves the data, and then moves on to do something else. Do not connect to the internet using a public network without setting the network to a public location. Windows asks you to do that. You really do want to do that. What this does is makes some firewall modifications that makes the machine more secure than if it's on a private. The other one's a private network and a work network, and they basically have the same configurations, except if you pick a work network, you can't become a home sharing network with those things. But if you're at McDonald's or Starbucks or any of those other places that give you free Wi-Fi, when you connect to it, be sure you specify that it's a public network. Unless you just want people to be able to attempt to hack you. Some people may want to do that. Use passwords with each user account. Generally, you want to use complex passwords. In the Windows world, complex passwords really not all that good. Because on your keyboard, you can basically have four things: uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. A complex password is three of those four components. If you want to make it more difficult, then you want to use special characters. Special characters increase the crack time, unless you're using rainbow tables, significantly. If you're using rainbow tables, the time to crack a password is 28 minutes. So,
I've used passphrases for years.
time to crack it with rainbow tables is 28 minutes. Problem is you got to be able to get the hash. I mean, once you get the hash, you got to crack it. But when you go through this thing, how do you actually get this information? As long as you're paying attention, then you're probably going to be okay. Why do all these places get compromised? Is it because these hackers are so smart?
No, because they don't do anything other than minimum security, if anything.
I just send you an email say, hey, give me your password. Hey, install this thing on your server so that I can get into it. And people do it.
Celebrities not setting up
And people do it. Yeah, all sorts of things. You don't put passwords on it. It just sits there. Yeah, a lot of times there's help inside the company. The thing that's really scary is you go to places, Amazon says, hey, give us your credit card and we'll set you up for one-click shopping, right? What does that mean? When Amazon gets compromised, your credit card got compromised. It's up to you. It's a little more difficult to type in the numbers every time, but they don't have it in their database.
You can use a manager on your computer for all that stuff.
There's lots of things that you can do to do that. But then somebody sends you a virus and get onto your computer, and then they got all your management software. So it's a never-ending battle, obviously, when we do these things. Keep away from smoke, water, and dust. Heard one of us say, I'm a smoker. Be careful around your machine. That can really do damage. That can really coat them with nicotine. Smoke, water, and dust. Water and dust, we're talking here. If you have a warehouse, you need to be particularly aware about the environment that the machines are operating in. Don't turn it on, turn it off unnecessarily. Don't run it while it's in the case, resting on a pillow or covered by a blanket. If you want to see how hot they'll get, set on a pillow sometime just for a few minutes.
Did you see the news where the girl went to bed with her iPhone or whatever under her pillow and they
burned the pillow off. Yeah, you're lucky that if you escape with those things. But these will cover the vents.
And then they try to survive.
Usually. Yeah. Protected against ESD, electrostatic discharge. That's when we shuffle our feet on the carpet and then shock each other and shock our machines to see what we can do with them. Remove the CD, DVD before traveling. Anybody ever made a CD come apart at full speed other than me? They really come apart.
Really?
Oh yeah, they come apart in hundreds of pieces. Be careful of that. Take precautions if the notebook gets wet. And does water necessarily damage electronics? Huh? If you turn it on, but that's not the water doing the damage. That's the short circuit that the water, because the conductor creates, right? Dry it out if it gets wet.
I did that. My cat knocked a whole thing of water on my laptop.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't on.
You're lucky.
Yeah, I just left it alone. I dried it out.
Yeah, dry it out.
What happened with the speakers were messed up.
Yeah, it's because it got into the, because they got paper in them, and the water got into the paper.
I wasn't over there, so
Yeah.
considering.
Yeah, it could have been anything. So the cat knocked it off, and this is for the recording. Cat knocked the water into it, and he dried it out, and it worked except for the speakers.
They worked.
That's a good deal. They worked poorly.
Right. At least it wasn't catastrophic.
Could have been.
Ooh, catastrophic. Clean the LCD panel with a soft dry cloth. I've noticed that there are, when we have lots of micro, and these slides were made before all this microfiber stuff came out. Microfiber cloth's pretty good. I bought a package. I'm a sucker for it, marked down to 99 cents. I was walking through Walmart the other day, and they had this microfiber set, 99 cents. One for your screen, which works really well, by the way. One for glass, and one for dust. So you can get cloths to clean these things with. You shouldn't clean them with Windex or invisible glass or those kinds of things. They've got chemicals in them that can actually do damage to them. Compressed air to keep the keyboard clean, trackball, whatever else that we need in this thing. Blow out the air vents. Remove the keyboard if the keys are sticking, and blow air under the keyboard itself. Contact cleaner for the battery connections and all those things. Control may be used to change Windows tools. That's pretty straightforward. Some settings, brightness, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, dual displays. One of the things to be aware of is the Wi-Fi switch. The Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi switch. Probably told you this story that a few years ago we had an instructor come in and says, "My wireless isn't working on my laptop. It was working when I left home." When they put it into the little bag that they carried it in, turn the radio off.
Wasn't an IT instructor, was it?
Wasn't an IT instructor. It was an English instructor. Turned the radio off. So those things you can turn them on and off. Screen brightness. Told you that one of the things that students used to love to do is to turn the screen brightness down so it looked like that the monitor was bad. Be careful of those kinds of things. Dual monitors on a laptop. Dual monitors on a laptop are probably easier than anything else, because all you got to do is plug in the VGA or the HDMI and tell it what you want it to be. I'm using a dual monitor here because you guys can see the one on the screen over here. It's got the same picture as the one up here, so we are actually duplicating one to the other. Extended means that I can have different things running on the different monitors, which is really handy to do. Like those of you who were willing to sit in the front, have in front of you, in the front half of the class. Touchpad. This is the thing that I personally love to hate because I always screw them up. I always wind up putting my hand on the pad part and it does stuff for me that I don't want it to do. You can actually turn a lot of that off. Actually, I went and got a wireless mouse and then disable the touchpad when the mouse is turned on and plugged in, when the Bluetooth dongle is plugged into it. It is your mouse. Tablet PCs, you may or may not have a stylus. I like a stylus because, one thing, it keeps the screen a lot cleaner. And I think you have a lot more control about what you're actually touching on these things.
Yeah, you can be a lot more precise.
Yeah, a lot more precise. I would really love to have a little bitty stylus, but they cost too much money. The styluses have come down quite a bit in price. They used to be, what, $12, $14 a piece. Now you can get them for $5 or $6, something like that. Let me do this. The PCMCIA card, know the terms, know what they are, and the key here is older notebooks offer these slots. You're going to see them on the ones you take apart, but you're not going to see them on the ones that you buy today. These are the old wireless NICs when you could buy a laptop without wireless. So you would put these things in and you would create a wireless situation. And it's the same thing about these. Know about them. When you take the A+, they may ask you about them. But for working on most of the machines that you're going to see today, they really don't have a whole lot of meaning. And this is I like it so much, the PC card, PCMCIA card, they all look very similar. The difference is it's going to be the size. Just like in the motherboard, it's going to be the size of these things. And they do have an eject button. And when you do these things, a lot of times there's going to be two trays in here. You can put two cards in a single slot. And they a lot of times come with a blank also. We have a lot of doing these things. See if the errors, back up the drivers. This is nothing that's different than anything else you've done. And always back up the drivers, maybe stored on the hard drive. Always have the drivers set for your machine. The AC adapter or a battery pack. And one of the things that they typically emphasize is if you change the battery, be sure you get the proper battery. All of particularly the manufacturer is going to say, only go to the manufacturer's website. There are other sites on the internet that you can buy batteries from. You can buy the extended life batteries or the extended hours batteries, and they typically, I did that one time, they're pretty darn heavy. Be aware of what's going on with the batteries based on the history that we've had lately with batteries, you know, the ones that just kind of catch on fire. When they're not running, when they're not sitting on the pillow. Really bad in places like airplanes. Yeah, because not a whole lot of places to go when you do those things. But be aware, stay up to date. If there's a problem with them, you're going to get warned. But don't take any chances with those. It's just not worth it. I'll do switching. Today's battery use lithium-ion technology, and these are the ones that have mostly had the problems. Second battery. The sheet battery is an inverter. An inverter allows us to take DC from the car and turn it into AC, which the computer will then turn back into DC. Right? Because when we talked about the power, computers use DC electricity. The inverter changes DC to AC. Yeah, and if you're going to run it in your car without running a battery down or something like that, you can use the inverter to do that. Let's take a break for a few minutes here before I drive Todd crazy. Okay, here we go back. Power management is going to be important with these things because you don't plug them in, you don't keep them plugged in. Well, some of us do because the batteries are weak. But power management, how bright's the screen going to be? Are you going to turn the hard drive off? And lots of different opinions on whether you should turn the hard drive off or not. One of the earlier slides says don't turn it on and off a lot. Your decision, but remember when you turn the hard drive off, the head crashes on the surface every time that happens. The thing that's going to take the most power is going to be the screen, the illumination for the screen. So you can usually configure it to have a lower power on that. A lot of the processors will automatically power down when they don't have a demand on them. That's what Celeron's all about. Power saving states, sleep mode, suspend mode, hibernation, and there should be a hybrid mode in here so that if you put it in sleep mode and if the power gets to a level that it can no longer maintain that information in memory, it automatically goes into hibernation mode and saves the information onto the hard drive. Power settings to be configured in the BIOS. Typically, in the new ones in Windows 7, there's going to be a power management, and you can create your own power plans in that area. Using the ACPI standards might refer to 5S states. Take a look at these. The hard drive and monitor turned off, the S1, S2, the processor is also turned off, S3. Everything is shut down except RAM and enough power. S4 is hibernation, S5 is a power state. We had an issue with these S states with our virtual server. It's got like, 8 cores, 16 cores. It would get to such a low load that would actually put itself in a hibernation. And then if you had like 1 or 2 machines running on it, they just quit running. But it would hibernate itself. We had to go into the BIOS and actually change the S states to turn them off so that wouldn't happen. These things, these S states, can affect what goes on the system. Port replicator, docking stations, connect a full-size monitor, keyboard, and AC power adapter. The docking station, you have a physical device on the desk and a docking station that connects to the laptop so that it becomes an integral part typically of the network. when we do these things.
What part does it use not USB on the sides? How does it actually?
It actually, usually when you see one, it is typically going to be part of the laptop itself, and it's just a plug.
Oh,
It just
okay.
plugs into the docking station, the fixed system. These are designed so that you can use laptops on your network and make them portable when you take them and take the information with you easily. And then when you get back, you can synchronize it. Upgrading internal parts, topics, how to upgrade memory, exchange a drive, and these are things that I'm probably going to spend a lot of time on because these activities are part of what taking it apart, seeing how you do these things and putting it back together are all about. Alternatives to fixing or upgrading the computer: return the notebook to the manufacturer, substitute an external component, replace the internal device, replace the laptop. Laptops don't last forever. Computers don't last forever. The laptops are generally considered consumable items. Except for people that pay $2,000 or $3,000 for them, they don't. Maybe they're just a higher cost consumable.
So they don't last long?
Typically, I know you can keep them forever, but what's the functionality of it?
That's on the internet now.
It's on the internet now. It depends on what you want to do with it. What's the functionality of it?
Motion videos, it won't.
What's the functionality of
The
it?
fact you can't upgrade them.
There you go. You can't upgrade it. So you really can't change. You can put more memory in it, you can put a new hard drive in it, but when you get them apart, tell me how you're going to upgrade. Other than, typically for memory, you're going to have two SODIMM slots in them. How much can you actually put into the system? That's why they're generally considered consumable items or expendable items, and they're not as long-lived in many cases as a desktop because it doesn't have the upgrade capability. Can you keep one forever? Sure. But what can you do with it? You may or may not be able to run Linux, depending on the manufacturer and how old it is. These are all the same things that we've seen again and again and again. Back up the data, put on your ESD bracelet, disconnect the AC adapter, undock it if it's docked, remove the cards, the CDs, flash, anything that's connected to it. Memory used in these things are SO DIMMs, SO small outline DIMMs. They're just smaller. SO RIMs are used by the older machines, and I think that some of these, I used to say that the machines you can take apart don't have any memory in them, but the last time we took it apart, some of them had memory in them, so you can see what if you haven't seen, you can see what an SO DIMM looks like. Those are kinds of things that probably you'll have to identify on the test. These pictures of SO DIMMs, and they go through the DDR, DDR2, DDR3 progression just like DIMMs did. How to upgrade, this is where we get to the general steps. These are the steps that are in the book. These are the steps that you're going to get from the manufacturer, whatever else you want to do. But the thing that probably is the big one here is to be sure that you know about the warranty status. Make sure you're not violating the warranty on these things. To replace memory, and actually I don't think that the memory bay really has anything on it. The ones that I've done, which haven't been that many, to replace or actually add RAM to them is a matter of taking one screw out, popping the memory out, or just putting the new memory in. If you're just adding to it, taking the old out, put the new in. Just similar to what you've done in the desktops. The hard drive, replacing the hard drive, same. Be aware of voiding the warranty. 2.5 inches wide. Be sure that you have the correct connection, be it serial ATA or SATA or PATA, that you have the correct type of drive in order to go in these things. And they just kind of, you open up, again, this is another bay, you open up with one or two screws and you take the hard drive out, put the new hard drive in. And again on these things, this is an older machine that has a little bit more complex system. This looks like an old IBM that I used to have. To replace the hard drive was not as obvious as looking on the back and it says, take these screws out to replace the hard drive. You had to know where the screws were and what to take out. This actually slid out the side. The tools to work on these things, the one tool that may be different to me than, or a set of tools that are different from working on a desktop is, screwdrivers need to be smaller. May need to be smaller when you're doing these things. Many screws, hundreds of tiny screws in these things. Keep them organized, and these are different things. Pill boxes, a piece of tape, double back tape, so that they don't fall off of the
Fish and lure boxes?
fish and lure boxes. Yep, that's like the pill boxes. Yeah, it's got lots of different compartments to put the screws in. Piece of tape, piece of white paper if you're not going to knock it off, so that you can actually see these tiny screws, because if you put it on something that's not really visible,
Before sneeze and
yeah, you sneeze and they go away. That's what the tape's for. But be aware of that and have some place to put your extra screws when you put it back together. I mean, I don't know. They always put extra parts in these things.
just like cars.
Just like cars. This is an example of somebody writing where these things go and then having the screws there with them. Not such a bad idea. All you guys with smartphones, sometimes that can help you out. Take pictures. Make sketches so that you know where it goes, how it goes back together. The only one that I'm going to go through here is find the hardware service manual. It'll tell you how to take it apart and put it back together. And that's what you really want to do. The rest of them have all been there. I love these. Reassemble in reverse order. It's like going to someplace. If you went to someplace in downtown New York City and you had a map, you know, the instructions from Bing or Google how to get there, and it said, how to get out in just reverse order.
One-way street.
Yeah. Similar, but document what you're doing, and they'll typically tell you how to put these things back together. Don't over tighten the screws. Put all of the everything back in. Keyboard and touchpad. Again, these things I'm just going to go through them. These are in the book. How to replace these things. What you really want to do any of these replacements is the manufacturer's service manual. You can usually find them on the internet. Disassembling, replacing the LCD, and these are all things that can be done with these things. Minimal upgrade. When you get it apart, when you look in this thing, SODEMs, what can you actually upgrade? You can add memory, you can change the hard drive, maybe change the radio. Limited upgrade capability of these things. Diagnostic software, the diagnostics, common problems and how to solve them. Toggle between keys. These things do have a function key on them typically. That the keys can do more than one thing. I think some of the newer, bigger ones probably have keypads on them. Most of them don't have keypads on them, so you have to use function keys, much like you do on your phone, in order to make things like numbers work. No wireless connectivity, and then we talked about this before. Is the adapter been turned off? Is there an access point in the area? Intermittent, and be sure it's in range, and keep in mind again, don't block the antenna. In a lot of cases, many cases, the antenna goes around the monitor. Power problems, the light's on, is it plugged in? Is the battery good? Is the battery charging? I recently bought one of these clever new 2-in-1 transformer, whatever devices, which was kind of neat. It only had one problem, battery wouldn't charge. is the battery charging? Is the system allowing the battery to charge when you do these things? Check the connection. Is the AC adapter good? I tend to keep things a long time. I had an AC adapter that quit working, and you could jiggle and you could see that it was okay, so I took it apart and fixed the broken wire. Those are things that are going to happen to you. LCD panel, is it turned off? If it's bad, the LCD panel can be changed. All of these things are not a lot different than the ones we've talked about before, and these are, again, in the book, tips for solving them. Display settings, adjust the brightness, update the video drivers, flickering screen by a bad video driver, low refresh rate, bad inverter, lots of different things can happen. Some of the video stuff can be replaced. The screens particularly can be replaced. Cracked screens, we've had students, again, that people would give them laptops that had a cracked screen. It's not going to be any good anymore. They'd go buy the $25, $35 screen and then resell the laptops.
Stack of them.
With broken screens? Are you going to fix them and sell them?
I might.
It's really not that big a deal in order to do that.
Most of them are Pentium Duo errors.
Yeah, if they're that old, there may not be a whole lot of demand for them. Battery, the different things that we can do with these things, but there's really not a lot of difference, except they're not upgradable. A lot of difference between a laptop and a desktop. Questions before we move on to the fun part of the evening? You ready, John?
Yes.